When many elements and matter come together, they form the existence and meet in one body. This can also be called a makeup or constitution. These structures' balance is a huge proof of the existence of God Almighty. Let us imagine that a pharmacy holds hundreds of jars filled with various substances. We arrive at the pharmacy and see that there are now hundreds of the same medicines and paste on the display shelf. We were asked to make a paste and medicine by using the ingredients in the jar. We examined the paste and medicines and see that in each of these jars, a particular amount of each substance was used, like 1 or 2 milligrams of this, 4 or 5 milligrams of that, or 6 to 7 milligrams from this, etc. If 1 milligram more or 1 milligram less of a substance is mixed, then the medicine could easily turn into a poison. Is it in any way possible or probable that if the jars were to have been knocked over by a strange coincidence or a gusty wind, and that only precise, though different, amounts of these substances that had been taken were to drip from the jars, split, and then come together to form this paste and medicine? If the entire world unites, will they be able to convince us that the medicine and paste have formed by a coincidence? If hundreds of samples of this medicine and paste are found, will they be able to induce us into believing that this is merely a result of coincidence? Is there any bigger fallacious superstition than this belief? Similarly, every life form can be likened to a paste, and every plant can be likened to a medicine, since they are formed from several diverse substances in precise amounts. For instance, let us look solely at a person. There are about 60 elements in our bodies. Our bodies contain specific amounts of iron, magnesium, chromium, and other such elements. A cause for disease develops when there is too much or too little of these elements in our bodies. For example, copper has a blood-producing characteristic. When there is too little of it, an outbreak of disease could occur. Manganese operates the functions of the brain, and a lack of it causes behavioral deformities. The duty of cadmium is to regulate blood pressure and to ensure it to operate smoothly. However, too much or too little of it can cause disturbances in blood pressure to appear. The accumulation of elements in any part of the body produces hormonal deficiencies. Just like the human body has a balance that is immensely precise, the other life forms, which are plants and animals, also possess the same kind of balance in their forms. While we refer those who want to learn more about this balance to a science book, we also ask the following question. While the simplest of medicines cannot form coincidentally, is it possible for the human body, or the body of another life form, which is balanced to such an extent, to develop by mere chance? Even if the entire world was to come together to convince us that an aspirin accidentally formed as a result of a glass jar filled with medicine having tipped over, we still would not be persuaded. Then how are we convinced that the human form, which is millions of times more advanced and more sensitive, formed as a result of some coincidence? Can a person who believes in such a wrong thought be called clever? Let alone being called clever, can he be called a human being? Besides, our body is not like a drug that was constructed once and then put aside. The total weight of the cells that die in our intestines in a year is 90 kilograms. The total weight of dead skin cells is 45 kilograms too. 200 billion red blood cells die every day in our body, and 10,000 red blood cells are created every second. Our body is a wonderful composition that is completely renewed every 6 months. Is it possible for that composition to form coincidentally? And when there are about 7 billion people of that composition in the world today, How can one believe that they form coincidental? Now, together with you, we are going to draw a picture of an animal that you probably have not heard of before. The animal that we are going to draw is the armadillo. By drawing an animal that we may not be familiar with, we will better understand the proof of possibility. Now, draw a body for the armadillo. However, before we begin, we ask this question: how many types of bodies can be drawn for the armadillo? Maybe we should ask this instead. If we were to hand pens to the 7 billion people on the earth and ask them to draw a body for the armadillo, would each person who had never seen an armadillo not draw a different figure? They most certainly would. And each person's drawing would not look the same. For example, while someone would draw its height at 5 meters, another would draw its height at 5 centimeters. Someone would draw its width as being 1 meter, and another would draw it as 5 centimeters. According to a person, this animal has 4 legs. According to another, it has 2 legs. The armadillo is red for someone, and for another, it is green. Just as the possibilities for the types of figures that can be drawn are endless and countless, those 7 billion people can draw 7 billion distinct bodies. If we wanted each person to draw 2 bodies, then this time there would be 14 billion possibilities as to what the figure should be. Now, we are going to draw a face for the armadillo, and our question is still the same. How many possible faces can be drawn for the armadillo? Our answer is yet the same. The numbers are boundless. Once again, if we asked 7 million people to draw an armadillo's face, every person would draw something different. One would draw a long nose, whereas another would draw a short nose. One would draw its ears on the side, and another would draw them on top. There would be 5 teeth in the armadillo's mouth in someone's illustration, and in another's illustration, there would be 10 teeth. For those who have never seen an armadillo, the possibilities for the types of faces that can be drawn are endless and countless. Now we're going to draw some limbs and organs for the armadillo. What should its hands and feet be like? What should its fingers and various other features look like? Once again, we ask the same question: in how many possible ways can its limbs and organs be drawn? The answer is once again the same. There are countless types of limbs and organs that can be drawn. One will draw wings, and another will not. One will draw its feet at the length of 1 meter. For another, there are no feet, since the armadillo could be a reptile for all they know. Someone will draw 3 fingers, whereas someone else will draw 5. Considering these boundless possibilities, everyone can draw varied limbs and organs for the armadillo. If all 7 billion people were to have pens in their hands, then 7 billion distinct designs for the limbs and organs would form. Now, let us determine the armadillo's traits. Will it be brave or timid? If it is to be brave, then how brave is it? Will it be slow-moving or fast? If it is to move fast, then what will its speed limit be? Will it be lazy or hard-working? If it is to be lazy, how lazy will it be? We will consider these characteristics and similar ones and choose one by one. In addition, we will determine the degree of each feature. It means that there are hundreds of characteristics to choose from, and for each of these hundreds of characteristics, there are hundreds of more degrees, and each of them must have a level to be determined. Now, our question is this: if we were to place the hundreds of characteristics that are to be chosen for the armadillo in front of the world's 7 billion people, and if we were to want these people to determine the armadillo's characteristics and their degrees, would there not be 7 billion distinct results? Of course there would be. It means that characteristics involve unlimited possibilities too. When we try to draw an armadillo, there are billions of different bodies that can be drawn, and hundreds of billions of different organs. There are also numerous attributes that can be chosen for it. Now, within these boundless possibilities, we find the armadillo standing in front of us. It is not the picture of the armadillo, it is a real armadillo. It is fitted in the most perfect body. It has been given the best face. It has been equipped with the most sapient of organs, and has been provided with the qualities that are most necessary for the duration of its life. In this situation, is it possible, within these boundless amounts of possibilities, that the preference for the best and most sapient option was in no way affected by the preference, appointment, and allocation of a decision-maker, but is instead the result of some coincidence? Is there such a possibility? It is the proof of possibility. Amongst boundless possibilities, the most perfect possibility is applied. Now, when we look at this world, we see that every being has its own particular figure, a nice face, as well as sapient and useful organs. In addition, the being is sent to the earth with qualities that allow it to continue and fulfill its life. Nevertheless, within the boundless amounts of possibilities, the being is given a particular figure, is ornamented with a suitable face, has been equipped with sapient and useful organs, and has been placed with qualities that are adequate to its body. In the most definite sense, this is a preference, an appropriation, and a designation. In other words, it is the work of God, and is in no way the work of coincidence. Now let us look at how the most appropriate preferences are chosen for a camel. A camel's hump are like a reservoir. For days, the camel is able to manage with this livelihood, and it can live without water for 3 weeks. Its feet are wide, and the camel can run in the sand without sinking. The lashes on its eyes are like a net, and even in the severest of conditions, its eyes will not be filled with sand. The camel's nose was created in such a way that even in the most frightening storms, the camel is still able to breathe easily. Its top lip is cleft, and it allows the camel to eat thorny desert plants. Its neck, which is 3 meters above the ground, enables the camel to eat leaves. Its knees are covered by calluses having been formed from skin that is as thick and hard as a horn. When the camel lies down, the calluses protect the animal from the ground's extreme heat and from injury. By means of its thick fur, the camel is able to endure summers that are 50+ degrees Celsius and winters that are 50 degrees Celsius and below. In addition to these characteristics, there are several others, in addition to all of its present characteristics. If the camel was to have the legs of a horse, it would not be able to travel even 1 kilometer in the desert. Likewise, if the camel's eyes did not have nets, then it would not be able to take even a single step in a storm. And if its lips were not cleft, then it would not be able to be nourished. In such cases, would any of the camel's other characteristics have any importance? When considering the camel's shape, an infinite amount of possibilities can be considered. However, the camel has been given the most perfect body and most perfect face for the duration of its life. And in addition, it has been provided with the most sapient of organs and has been fitted with the most useful qualities. Certainly, this work is proof that there is one who makes preferences and designations. This being's will and wisdom can even be shown to those who are blind. Now, compare elephants, fish, birds, insects, plants, and other creatures to a camel. Think of the existing possibilities for their bodies, faces, organs, and characteristics. Afterwards, visualize the most perfect possibility with your eyes. Then, ask yourself whether or not this preference is a work of coincidence. If you are unable to picture the whole creature, then look at a fly's wing. Then, think of the millions of types of wings that could have been attached, and how the most appropriate of these possibilities was chosen. These types of wings are not apparent on just one fly, but are attached on every one of its kind, figuring that there are billions of possibilities for the types of wings. Yet the best kind was chosen and is visible on all flies. Could this still be an art of coincidence? In light of all these examples, let us now summarize the proof of possibility. In this world, every being has a particular body for itself. Although there are countless possibilities of body types, the most perfect of these possibilities has been chosen, which proves the presence of a decision maker, and this decision maker is God. Once again, every being on this planet has a particular face and shape for itself. While there are boundless possibilities in the types of faces and shapes, the best of them were chosen, which proves that there is a patron of will, and this patron of will is God. Every being on this planet has a particular personality for itself. While there are boundless possibilities in the types of personalities, the best of them was chosen, which proves the existence of a designator, and this designator is God. Lastly, every being on this planet has special and sapient organs for itself. While there are boundless possibilities in the types of special and sapient organs, the best of them were chosen, which proves the existence of an administrator, and that administrator is God. Briefly, let alone the universe, even a fly's wing cannot be interpreted as a coincidence. If we put a pencil and some paper into a room and let them remain in the same place for 1,000 years, do you think it would be possible for the single letter of A to come into existence on the paper? Or if we put a piece of wood, some nails, and a hammer, and again let them remain there for 1,000 years, do you think it would be possible for a table to form on its own in that 1,000 years? Or if we put some paint with a canvas together in a room and let them remain there for 1,000 or even 10,000 years, would it be possible for a picture to come into existence on its own? Or let us ask it this way: can anyone convince you that the single letter of A, table, or a picture can come into existence by mere coincidence? In other words, suppose that they said this letter of A has come into existence by the coincidental move of a pencil, and this artful table has come into existence by the coming together of the pieces of wood and the hammering of nails by themselves. And also this wonderful picture has been formed by the falling of paint on the canvas due to the blowing of wind. Can they convince you? Of course not, because coincidence cannot be claimed to be the artist or the craftsman of a work by any means. Actually, a created work or art requires the existence of someone who created it, and a craftsman who prefers its existence to its absence. It is impossible for a work to exist without a craftsman. Yes, a letter cannot exist without an author. A table cannot exist without a craftsman. And a painting cannot exist without an artist. We can comprehend this proof better with the following example. Imagine that you pick up a piece of paper and a pen. You write A on the paper. It has been created later. It was not there a few minutes ago, but now it is there. The letter A did not exist a few minutes ago, and yet now it exists. It is impossible for the letter A to exist without its writer. Because our rule is this: each work of art created later proves the existence of a craftsman. who created it and who prefers its existence to its absence. Similarly, beings created before our eyes resemble the letter A, each of them from a bird to a flower, from a butterfly to a tree, from fish to a bee resembles the letter A. And maybe they do not resemble A, but a book. As even a single letter of A needs a creator in order to come into existence, and as it cannot exist on its own, it is, of course, impossible for all the innumerable beings in the universe to exist on their own. Just as a single letter of A proves the existence of its writer and shouts out with its own existence the existence of the writer, so too do innumerable beings, each of which resemble a book, prove the existence of their writer, who is God, and they indicate God's existence with their own existence. Now, how can one who agrees that a letter cannot exist without its writer, that a painting cannot exist without its artist, and that an act cannot exist without its doer, conclude that this book of the universe exists without its author, that the lively scenes in it are without their owner, and that all these acts occurring in the universe are without their doer? We can also use this proof by showing that the universe was created out of nothing. Just as in the example of letter A, the universe did not exist once upon a time, and it was created later. As everything created later needs a creator, so the universe must have a creator too. He is the creator, who preferred the existence of the universe to its absence, and brought this universe out to the world of existence from the darkness of absence. If a 20,000-word dictionary was given to you, and you were requested to add a word that was not in there, what must you first do to include this new word in the dictionary? You would first have to memorize all the words in the dictionary, because it is not possible to add a new word without knowing what is already there. Now, instead of a 20,000-word dictionary, suppose you were given a 7-billion-word dictionary, and were expected to add 350,000 new words per day. Would you be able to do it? Of course not. Without using a device such as a computer, how many people would it take to get this job done? In addition, these people would be given 1 million different dictionaries, so they could add new words each day. 100,000 words would be added daily to some of these dictionaries. 500,000 words would be added to others each day, and to some others, not 1 million, but billions of words would be added per day. Each word that is added does not resemble any of the words in that dictionary. Well, is it possible to do it? If you see that this task is done perfectly, and that hundreds of thousands and millions of new words are added to each one of 1 million different dictionaries per day, can you refer it to coincidence? Definitely not. Similarly, a human being is a type of dictionary. If we compare each person to a word, then this dictionary, planet Earth, has 7 billion words. Every human, which is a word in the dictionary of people, does not look like one another. And each day, 350,000 new words would be added to this dictionary. Yes, every day, 350,000 people are born, and all 350,000 of these individuals do not look the same as anyone else who had been created before. Is it possible for this dictionary to come into existence coincidentally, and new words to be added every day? Scientists have discovered 1 million unique species, from birds to fish, flowers to trees, and from insects to animals. There are a number of species that we cannot begin to count. 1 million exactly. If we compare each species to a dictionary, it means that right now there are exactly 1 million dictionaries that are distinct from one another. From these dictionaries, let us look solely at the dictionary of flies. The number of flies that are created during the spring is much greater than all people that have been created from Prophet Adam to all of those to be created until doomsday. Now, can you imagine the multitude of words in the dictionary of flies? And in this dictionary, no word resembles another word, as no fly is the same as another. Is it possible for trillions of flies, an amount that cannot even be expressed, to find bodies for themselves, all on their own, and for each one to possess a different form? Is this at all possible? Snowflakes are also a dictionary. We probably will not be able to express their exact number. And in this dictionary, no word is the same as another. Yes, every snowflake is different from one another. No two snowflakes are identical. Who but God could create different shapes, all being distinct from one another, in snowflakes, as big as the size of fingernails? Now, let us put these dictionaries aside and solely look at the human dictionary and examine the human face, which happens to be a word in this dictionary, even if we leave aside the head, which is an outcome of an extraordinary planning with all of its components. There are millions of probabilities for a face that can be placed on this prepared material. Among those numerous probabilities, it is definitely impossible to choose the most suitable and the most beautiful one. In a way to incapacitate all minds, the material used on a person's face is utterly simple and plain. There is only one skin, one pair of eyes, and a little hair. Despite this, if you had never seen the beauty of a face, would you have been able to imagine that a 2-month-old baby's face, a beauty amidst simplicity and plainness, could be created? After drawing a face for a person, it is as impossible to draw another face for a second person. There is nothing as difficult as drawing a separate face for each one by using the same elements, for it is necessary to draw a face by leaving aside all of the faces drawn previously. Besides, the face of a person is not a simple portrait. Each organ on the face has functions that necessitate both limitless art and limitless knowledge. Even if we were to put all these functions aside, would it not be just as perfect to create facial expressions such as a smile, worry, fear, laughter, and hundreds of others, as it is to create the face? It is difficult to fill a cup with the ocean. Similarly, it is also difficult to depict the human soul in a face. A believer's face is bright like his soul, whereas a non-believer's face is dark like his soul. Sometimes it could take years for a sculptor to give a basic statue its symmetry. On the other hand, every second, 4 people, and every day, 350,000 people are being fully created with utmost easiness. Each individual has a different face. When we see twins or triplets that resemble each other, we marvel at them. Then, we would like to ask, which one is more difficult, to make 2 faces resemble each other, or to make billions of people not resemble one another? Why do we marvel at the former, but not marvel at the latter? Who is the creator of these distinct faces? Who is the artist who makes brilliant works of art from simple substances, and whose craftsmanship perplexes the mind? Who is the one who conveys a face's countless expressions? Who is the one who has given each individual a distinct face? Who is the one who allows the face's organs to work perfectly? Who is the one who has taught the eye to see, the nose to smell, the tongue to taste, and the ears to hear? There is one answer to all these whos, and that is God, who is Musawwir, the shaper. Yes, like a person's face. All existing creatures, from raindrops to snowflakes, golden daisies to carnations, fingerprints to eye pupils, from ants to the stars of the heavens and the particles of universes, are created in a particular face and shape for themselves. As you see, the bestowal of a distinct face on every being, and for that being to not look like another individual in its species, proves that God Almighty exists and He is one. His knowledge is boundless, His power is endless, and His will is unlimited. We think that the sun and its 7 colors brighten and warm the windows of our home. Now, if we disaffirmed the sun that brightens our windows, then what would we have to accept? We would have to accept that a sun, its body, and its reality are found within our window. Nevertheless, there is a light and warmth. In that case, a sun possessing this light and warmth is necessary. If a sun's absence was assumed, and if it was not accepted that the sun was the heat source, then we would have to accept that this light and heat were products of the window. Since the presence of the heat and light are evident, they most undoubtedly have a master that possesses them. Besides, this kind of light and heat could only appear through a source that is the size of the sun. In that case, when we disaffirm the sun, then we would be obliged to accept that a real sun is in our window, and that the possessor of this light and heat is the window itself. If the warming and lightening of things through the sun's measureless light and heat is considered, then disavowing the presence of the solitary sun in the sky will result in the obligation to accept that all materials hold a true sun in themselves. That means that the one who is unable to accept the presence of the solitary sun in the sky will be obligated to accept the sun's when he or she sees the sun's light and warmth appear on the materials themselves. However, as we have already expressed, a light and warmth are evident, and these can only emerge through one sun. Just like this example, God, who is the infinite and eternal Sun, has lightened everything in this realm and the universe with His divine names, Asma al-Husna. Like in our given example, the names and qualities that appear in this realm and the universe cannot be ownerless. Nevertheless, both a name and a characteristic must belong to something or someone. If a name exists, then there must be an entity that has such a name. Likewise, if a characteristic exists, then someone or something must certainly possess it. For example, let us imagine that we wrote a letter on a piece of paper with a pen. In this act, and in the letter A on the page, the following are seen. 1. The presence of the letter A on this page was preferred to its absence. However, this letter A was not on this page earlier, and has just appeared. For something to appear from nothing, a possessor of free will must be present, to prefer its presence to its absence. A doer must have a will, so that he will prefer existence to non-existence. An action that does not have free will and volition cannot be the scribe of the letter A, and cannot make such a claim either. In that case, the appearance of the letter A from nowhere requires a scribe that has free will. 2. The letter A on this page is not just an ordinary drawing. It is an artistic drawing with meaning. In that case, the entity who is both a scribe and artist must have knowledge. In other words, he or she must be a scholar. It is not possible for someone who does not have knowledge and literacy to write the letter A, which signifies meaning. In that case, the appearance of the letter A from nowhere necessitates a scribe who has knowledge. 3. In addition, this scribe must also possess strength. If he or she had knowledge and free will, but did not have strength, in other words, was paralyzed and could not move his or her hand, then he or she would not be able to write the letter A. The presence of the letter A indicates its scribe's strength. 4. The scribe must also be a living being. Someone who is not living cannot have knowledge, free will, and strength. If we put a pen and paper next to a lifeless rock and left them there for 1,000,000 years, we still would not be able to see a letter A written on that paper. This means that the presence of the letter A indicates that its scribe is a living being, is high. You can increase these examples and the implications that the letter A denotes for its scribe. Now, we're going to look for a scribe for the letter A. If we disaffirmed the person who drew the letter A as being the scribe, and instead said that this pen wrote this A, then we would be assigning the characteristics that are required in a scribe, which are free will, knowledge, and strength to the pen. And we would be obligated to accept nonsensical talk such as, this pen is a scholar, it possesses free will and strength, and is a living being, since a name and characteristics are apparent. Names and characteristics cannot exist without having owners. Names and characteristics cannot exist without someone or something owning them. For this reason, we would have to associate knowledge, free will, strength, and life to whomever we accept as being the scribe, since these are the qualities that are required of such an entity. Similarly, the universe is a letter and a book. If God were not accepted as its scribe, then all the names and characteristics that are visible in this book would be attributed to atoms, causes, coincidence, and nature. And such an attribution would be elevating them to the station of God. A person who disaffirms because he or she is unable to fit the concept of God into his or her mind will have to accept cells and atoms as his or her gods. Let us try to understand the situation better through an example. We always see the clouds from which rain pours in front of our eyes. Have we ever thought about what qualities are required of the agent of rain? Now, let us look at the names and qualities that appear in this event. 1. The rain's presence has been preferred to its absence. Just a little while ago, the raindrops were not present, but now they are here. To prefer something's presence to its absence is only possible if the characteristic of willpower is possessed. In that case, the entity that produces rain must have willpower. The one without willpower cannot claim to have produced a single raindrop. 2. The structure of rain contains 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. The formation of raindrops through the bonding of 2 hydrogen atoms and a single oxygen atom is only made possible when a possessor of knowledge is present. The entity that produces rain must also have knowledge, and the one without knowledge cannot claim to possess a single raindrop. 3. In addition, the production of rain requires the possession of infinite strength. The production of water instead of fire, which results through the combining of 2 elements in which one is flammable and the other non-flammable, can only occur through infinite strength. In that case, the entity that produces rain must also have strength and power. The one without strength and power cannot claim to possess a single raindrop. 4. The ability to produce rain without having raindrops colliding into one another and the connection of the countless benefits of rain requires a possessor of wisdom. It is not possible for a being who is not wise to invent a single drop and to attach so many benefits to rain. In that case, the entity that produces this rain must also have wisdom. The one without wisdom cannot claim to possess a single raindrop. 5. When rain was created, it was not considered alone. Its relation with all kinds of things was taken into consideration. For example, people and animals drink from that rain. The soil revives with it, and plants as well as trees find life with it. The entity that creates rain must be cognizant of humans, animals, and plants, so that it can create rain in a way that is beneficial to their anatomies. This explanation encompasses all kinds of things. The one who is unable to encompass and see all kinds of things at the same time cannot make rain beneficial to them. In that case, the entity that produces this rain must be able to encompass and see. 6. The sending of rain to all inhabitants on the earth is a work of infinite compassion. It would not be possible for the one who does not feel sympathy and compassion for the inhabitants of the earth to create rain. In that case, the entity that produces rain must be compassionate. The one without compassion cannot claim to possess a single raindrop. 7. To possess the qualities that we have listed, one must first be living. The one who is not alive cannot have free will, knowledge, power, and any of the other characteristics. There are dozens of more names and characteristics that are apparent with rain. However, we will now cut it short, as a word to the wise is enough. Now, we're going to look for a doer that can create rain. We saw that the entity that creates rain must have free will, knowledge, power, reason, compassion, sight, a life, the ability to encompass, and many other similar characteristics and names. The one who is unable to possess these characteristics cannot possess a single raindrop. Nevertheless, raindrops, which have been created with wisdom, are apparent, as are the names and characteristics that are seen with them. Whose names and characteristics are they? We say they belong to God, and do not accept that the creation of rain can be anyone else's deed other than His, since only God can be the creator of such a sapient act. If someone says the opposite by disaffirming God, then he or she must attribute the creation of rain to someone. An action is apparent, and actions must have agents. The person must also accept the candidate that he or she presents as having the aforementioned names and qualities. It is not possible for the one who was unable to possess these names and qualities to actualize the pouring of rain and to create a single raindrop. In that case, there are two paths. Either one accepts God and attributes the pouring of rain as well as the names and characteristics that are apparent in this situation to him, or he or she accepts the cloud as being the agent and claims that it possesses the aforementioned names and qualities that are seen with rain. In that case, the cloud, which is the pretended agent, would possess God's qualities and would be elevated to the station of God. In summary, there are names and characteristics that are visible in rain. It is not possible for these names and characteristics to be ownerless. The one who disaffirms God will give a cloud that has no sense of itself the measures of knowledge, power, wisdom, compassion, and mercy that belong to God, and will fall into disbelief. With this belief, they would make this cloud their God. What we mean by God is the entity that possesses the names and qualities that we have listed. It means that whomever you attribute these names and qualities to, you accept them as a God. Like in our previous example, the person who disaffirmed the sun would be obligated to accept the presence of a true sun in their window, because the possessor of this light is called a Son. Similarly, whomever we accept as the possessor of the names and qualities that manifest in a material would be our God. Because we call the possessor of these names and qualities God, we only looked at rain and some of the names and characteristics that have been manifested within it. Also, look at the universe and see the names and characteristics that have been manifested. Then try to find an agent that those names and characteristics can be attributed to. Go up to the skies, dive to the depths of the seas, travel the wilderness, and let no rock be unturned. Could you find anyone else other than God who can possess these many names and qualities that appear in the universe? It is not possible, but if it was possible, let us suppose that someone brought a dead bird back to life in front of our eyes. We would be so shocked and would deny what our eyes saw. We would not be able to forget this incident until we died. Nevertheless, the truth of the bestowal of life is a reality that is just as fascinating and perplexing. However, this incident, which would perplex us and cause us to disclaim what we saw, and would be something that we could never forget, is actually nothing but a dead bird being brought back to life in front of our eyes. Which one is more astonishing? Resurrecting a dead bird, or having living birds come out of dead eggs? Is bringing a dead bird back to life more perplexing, or creating life forms that come into existence through water droplets? Is resurrecting a dead bird back to life more strange, or the creation of trees and plants from dead seeds and dead germs? Why do we not accredit this perplexity and amazement to God? God arranges resurrections that are far more amazing, in front of our eyes all the time. For example, we see in front of our eyes that life springs from various materials, and that the earth is overflowing with life forms, creatures that are created from eggs, germs, seeds, and water drops called sperm are living beings, and a portion of these living beings have a soul. It is unthinkable that non-living beings could provide life for another. In that case, the life that appears in front of our eyes could only have resulted from God, who is Hayy, ever-living, and Qayyum, self-subsisting sustainer of all, creating them. It means that one of the greatest proofs of God's existence is His right to give life. We now ask the person who dares to refute God's presence, who is the one who creates and makes life forms sprout from simple substances like eggs, seeds, germs, and water droplets? Who besides God could create them wisely? Have we ever thought of what was necessary to continue this life, which is beautiful and pleasant in every way? Undoubtedly, thousands of factors must come together. If there is too much or too little of something, it could result in the paralysis of life. For example, the smallest disruption in the balance of heat or cold could eliminate everything. The temperature is to be set in a way so that living beings will be able to continue living. When the temperature rises to 60 degrees Celsius, then the life forms will face the risk of death. The arranging of the atmosphere in a way that is suitable to life is another important condition. The possibility of finding the gases in their current states together in one place is too small for calculating in numbers. The gases have specific escape velocities, just like a bird in a cage. The balance will be disrupted if there is a decrease or increase in these velocities. However, the velocity that pressures the gases to escape is aligned with the gravity that holds them in the atmosphere in such a way that having them escape and spread is not in question. Water is also essential for life. The sources of water are the oceans and seas. In our world, 16 million tons of water evaporates per second, and every year, 505 million tons of water evaporates and dissipates in 4 directions through winds. The water is taken to places that are in need of water, and then it evaporates again and rises to the sky so that life can continue. 300,000 sextillion calories are necessary for the water to evaporate. If we substituted coal in this example, then Turkey would be in need of a 4.1016 amount of coal, and the Turkish economy would require hundreds of trillions of dollars. If we were to put all of life's conditions to one side, and if all factors possessed efficiency and volition, then would their powers be enough to adjust the temperature, the atmosphere, and the water supply? Like the bestowal of life, the bestowal of a soul is a reality that proves God's existence. Nevertheless, the existence of the soul cannot be explained by any other cause except God. It is not possible to deny God after one accepts the soul's reality. However, there is no material answer to the question, how did the soul enter the body? Since the existence of the soul cannot be explained by any other things, atheists have dared to deny its existence. If the existence of the soul is acknowledged, then atheists will also be obliged to accept God. In this manner, we deem that it is appropriate to assert the proofs of the soul's existence. In order to ask the question, who created this soul? We must first prove that the soul exists. In that case, we will first prove the soul's existence, and we can ask our question later. 1. Concepts such as law, brotherhood, and family are existent because of the soul's existence. We can explain it as follows. As it is well known, once in every 6 months, the entire cells of a person change, and he or she virtually becomes a brand new person. Now let us imagine a murderer appearing in front of the judge in a courtroom. Suppose the judge decides to punish the murderer with a 20-year prison term, and the murderer turns to the judge and says, "You cannot punish me, because I was not the one who committed the murder. I became a new person because my cells changed. My current flesh is pure." What could the judge say in counter-response? Nothing, because the judge is no longer his old self either. In addition, think of concepts like family and fellowship. The material body of my mother, who gave birth to me, changed several times. Nothing from her body that brought me into this world remained since it completely changed. 6 months after my birth, my mother passed away in terms of her material body. If the existence of the soul is not accepted, then how can one get rid of such a deadlock? 2. If a person were to come to this world in a hollow space with no eyes, nose, hands, and other limbs, he cannot nor comprehend such concepts, such as length, greatness, proximity, and smallness. However, he will not doubt his existence. Organs like the eyes, nose, and hands are necessary to understand the external world, and without them, a person will not be able to understand it. However, will not doubt his own existence. In that case, the one who knows its own identity is the soul. 3. When a person accomplishes a task, they say, "I did it." By saying such a thing, a person does not attribute the credit to his organs. Similarly, when one says, "I did it," it does not imply meanings such as, "My hand wrote it," "My foot ran," and "My ear heard." In that case, what is the "I" in the phrase, "I did it"? When a person says "I," it signifies an-nafs an-natik, or in other words, the soul. When he says, my pen, the word my denotes the soul. 4. There is no will and the ability to make choices in the nature of matter. However, a person has unlimited voluntary functions. If a person was only a material being, then he would have to lack free will, since matter does not have the ability to make decisions. In that case, since matter cannot be the doer of those acts, then the soul must have done them. That is, a person's free will proves the soul's existence clearly. 5. There is no will in the nature of matter. Similarly, qualities such as hearing, seeing, tasting, and feeling are absent. If man was a soulless material being, then the mentioned qualities would not be found in the person. In that case, since there is a soul, a human is not only composed of material things, he or she has a soul, and those mentioned qualities belong to the soul. 6. If the brain were to expand, it could stimulate the nerve that is in charge of moving the finger, and in turn, the finger would move. However, it could not cause the buttoning of a shirt, because the act of buttoning is complex and cannot simply occur by agitating a nerve. In that case, we ask this question: if it is not the brain that causes a finger to button, then what else could it be? It is the soul, of course. 7. Physical contact is necessary for the movement of matter. Without physical contact, it is impossible for matter to move. A person watching television will laugh, cry, worry, get excited, etc. In that case, is it matter that laughs and cries? Of course not, because a kind of physical contact did not occur. In that case, to what do these attributes belong? To the soul, of course. 8. We weighed a person before and after his death. His weight prior to death was 70 kilograms, and after he died, his weight was still the same. How did he become a lifeless being, though he was laughing, running, and talking? What was it that came out of this person? Of course, it was his soul that left the body, because the experiment proved that there was no loss from the material body. 9. Everyone's brain works in the same way. But despite this, everyone has different ideas. What is the reason for these differences in ideas? The answer is that everyone has a different soul. If thinking was only a function of the brain, then everybody would be thinking the same way. The qualities of matter are stable and do not change. It shows that the differences in ideas are proof of the soul's existence. 10. Telepathy, which is accepted even by the material science, cannot be explained by anything other than the existence of the soul. How can materialism explain the communication of two people who are kilometers away from one another and do not have someone in between to convey their messages? It shows that telepathy also proves that the soul exists. 11. Telekinesis occurs without any physical contact and involves moving an object with a thought, and can only be explained by the existence of the soul. You have probably seen or read about the people who bend spoons, move the things in front of them through attention and concentration. Is it possible to explain it through matter? Definitely not. Then, telekinesis also proves the existence of the soul. 12. Dreams also prove the soul's existence. We see that the dreams we see often turn out to be true in reality on the day we see them, or within the next few days. This is some knowledge that is acquired by the approaching of the soul's access to the realms of the unknown. If we deny the soul, then how will we be able to explain this occurrence? It means that dreams, especially true dreams, are proof of the soul's existence. 13. Now use your imagination to gather all of the flesh in your body in one place. Now bring your bones, hairs, eyes, nails, and other organs to the same meeting place. Now we ask this question: where are your emotions? Where are hundreds of emotions like compassion, affection, love, ambition, and hatred? If these were the products of our material body, then we would be able to visually separate them to one side and see their shapes as well. It means that emotions are products of the soul, not the body. In that case, every emotion that is found in the human being is proof of the soul's existence. 14. Qualities such as generosity, kindness, courage, and knowledge are all different among people. While it is like an ocean for one, it is like a drop for another. If these were the qualities of matter, then every person would have them at the same degree, because matter is characterized as being stable and it does not change. In that case, they cannot be the qualities of matter. They can only be the qualities of the soul. All qualities that are found in different degrees amongst people are proofs of the soul's existence. 15. Joy and sorrow come from two sources. The first one is the bodily sorrow and pleasures. The other is spiritual sorrow and pleasures. For instance, a person who meets his friend takes pleasure. It is not a material, but a spiritual pleasure. As the saying goes, the wound caused by a sword can be healed, but the wound caused by a tongue cannot be healed. Is what the tongue wounds something other than the soul? That is, all of the spiritual pleasures and sorrow that man feels prove the existence of the soul. After proving the existence of the soul through 15 proofs mentioned above, we want to ask the following: who is the one that created the soul and blew life into it? Who other than God can be the doer of that wise invention? The reality of order is one of the greatest proofs of God's existence. There is such an order in everything in the universe, from a fly's wing to the stars in the skies, to an atom, to the depths of the seas, that it reflects the Creator's existence like a sun. Yes, order can only emerge from a single hand. If many hands interfere in a task, then it becomes muddled. A country cannot have two kings, a province cannot have two governors, and a village cannot have two chiefs. If there are two heads, then there will be disorder. Since this universe has order instead of chaos, God, who established this order, must be existent and unique. This exquisite order, which is in sight, cannot be explained by anything other than God's existence. The Holy Quran attracts the attention to this reality with the following verse: He who created the 7 heavens, one above another, no want of proportion wilt thou see in the creation of God, most gracious. So turn thy vision again. Seest thou any flaw? Again, turn thy vision a second time. Thy vision will come back to thee dull and discomfited, in a state worn out. Surah Al-Mulk, verses 3 to 4. Books with loads of volumes can be written, and have been written, to explain the universe's order. A book can be written even regarding the orderliness of a fly's body. We will only examine the smallest building block of material, the atom, and refer the balance found in the universe and its articles to science books. Everything from the air, water, mountains, animals, plants, and our bodies to the sofa that you are sitting on. In summary, everything that you see, from the smallest to the largest, everything you touch and feel, is comprised of atoms. Atoms are so small that it is not possible to see these tiny particles even through the most powerful microscopes. let us try to demonstrate the smallness of atoms through an example. Imagine having a key in your hand. Surely, it is impossible for you to see the atoms in this key. Let us assume that you maximized the key to the Earth's dimensions so that you could see these atoms. If the key was maximized to Earth's dimensions, only then could you see that every atom in that key was the size of a cherry. Every atom comprises a nucleus, and every nucleus has been formed from the electrons revolving in the orbits very far away. The radius of a nucleus is about 1/10,000th of an atom's radius. Let us look for the nucleus and the atoms that are the size of cherries when we bring the key to the Earth's dimensions. However, this search is futile because even on this type of scale, we do not have the opportunity to observe a nucleus that is so small. We could see the nucleus only when the cherry that represents our atom would have to grow into a ball that is 200 meters tall. Despite this inconceivable dimension, our atom's nucleus would not amount to anything larger than a very small dust particle. Now, if you wish, let us picture the order of this tiny structure. Due to their electric charges, the electrons in the atom continuously spin around the nucleus. All electrons are negatively charged, whereas all protons are positively charged. The positive charge within the atom's nucleus pulls the electrons towards it. And for that reason, the electrons are unable to separate from around its surroundings. The number of protons in the center of an atom is equal to the number of electrons on the outside. Thus, the atom's electrical charge is balanced. However, the proton's volume and mass are more than those of an electron. If a comparison has to be made, it is like the difference in size between a human and a hazelnut. Nevertheless, their electric charges are the same. What would happen if their electric charges were not equal? In that case, every atom in the universe, due to the extra positive electricity, would possess a positive charge. As a result, every atom in the universe would push one another. What would be experienced if all atoms in the universe shoved one another? Everything would be put out of the ordinary. When this change takes place in atoms, your torso, head, eyes, teeth, in short, every part of your body are broken to pieces. The room in which you sit and the outer world that is seen through the window are destroyed at once. All of the seas, mountains in the world, all of the planets in the solar system, and all of the celestial bodies in the universe are broken into numerous pieces at once. Then, no visible object exists in the universe. Besides, such an occurrence among living beings can take place when the balance between the charges of electrons and protons changes only at the rate of 1 in 100 billion. The destruction of the universe can occur when that balance changes only at the rate of 1 in 1 quintillion. That is, the existence of the universe and the living beings becomes possible only through such a delicate order and balance. What we have explained till now were only a few details on the flawless order of one atom. In fact, volumes of books can be written about the atom since it possesses an order and structure that are extensive. Now, from the orderly motions of the stars to the orderly anatomies of creatures, to the orderly creation of organs, to the orderly alignment of teeth, think of the order of the universe and the order of everything within it. Then provide an answer to this question. How is it that a person has to accept the reality that a driver is present in a car, moving in an orderly fashion on a straight road, yet attributes the order of the universe to coincidences and causes? If you were to enlarge a person to the size of a city in your imagination, then his or her veins would probably be as wide as a road. Would you be able to find your way if you were put into this body and were expected to visit the ear or any other organ. We, who have difficulty finding the exit door in a large building and who ask several others where an address in our locality is, probably would never reach the ear. Nevertheless, substances that enter our bodies for the first time are able to find their way without asking anyone for help, despite being mindless, without willpower, unconscious, powerless, and lifeless. Elements that are necessary for the eye go to the eye, and likewise, elements that belong to the heart go to the heart. How are they able to find their way without confusion? How are these particles able to make this journey, which we are unable to make despite our intelligence? There could be two answers to these questions. One, because these elements are so smart, they can make this journey without asking for help. Two, God Almighty is handling and inciting them. They are all His civil servants, and they work through His incitation. Now let us look at some other samples of the proof of divine incitation. We see the movement of birds to different lands. When migration season arrives, birds like bee-eaters, quail, and starlings are able to migrate 7,000 kilometers. A Central European stork migrates 10,000 kilometers and flies 150 kilometers per day. However, the migratory champion is the Arctic tern that can travel 25,000 kilometers. Yes, you haven't misheard. Exactly 25,000 kilometers. Now think of this. You go out on a trip with your car, an address that is 25,000 kilometers away from you. A place that is practically on the other side of the world is given to you, and you are expected to go there. You do not have a map, a compass, any road signs to guide you, or anyone to ask for directions. You are expected to find and follow the shortest route. Now let us forget about the shortest route and say that we have settled for the longest route. Is it possible for you to complete this trip and find the given address with your intelligence and knowledge? How could it be possible? How can a person who is unable to find the exit door in a large building be able to complete a trip of 25,000 kilometers? Then how can an Arctic tern complete a journey that a human is unable to make? There are two options. One, either this bird is much smarter, more intelligent, and more skillful than a person. Two, or this bird is not completing this journey on its own and is being inspired to do so. It finds its way by means of divine incitation. In other words, inspiration. Which of these options could be true? If we accept that this bird migrates on its own, then we will have to accept that this bird is being more intelligent than a human. A creature that can achieve something that a human is unable to do must certainly be smarter than a human. A bat was taken from a cave and was put into a cage that did not allow sunlight to permeate. In addition, the cage was placed 300 kilometers away from the cave. It was later determined that the bat returned to its cave. And here, our question is the same. If this is not divine incitation, then what else can it be? How can a bat find a cave that is 300 kilometers away on its own? Would you be able to find your way back home, which is 300 kilometers away, if they tied a handkerchief on your eyes and expected you not to consult with anyone and not to look at any road signs? A stork that had never migrated before was taken to Italy in a cage and was set free during the migration season. It was seen that this stork had taken the shortest route and, 125 days later, arrived at the same place that its breed had migrated. Now let us put birds aside and look at ourselves. Even when an address is given to us, we often get lost and are unable to find our location. Moreover, when we visit a hospital, we have difficulty in finding the exit door. In addition, if all road signs were removed and we were expected to travel from one city to another, then we probably would not be able to reach there until the end of our lives. Are birds smarter than us? Or is there someone who inspires them? In that case, by disaffirming God, it becomes possible to accept that one is dumber than a bird. If examples of divine incitation were to be counted, they would never finish. We plan to share with you one last account that we find very interesting and believe will astonish you. By recounting this incident, we will complete this proof. Scientists who study the reproduction of eels had discovered something immensely interesting. When it came time for mother eels to lay their eggs, they would migrate towards the Sargasso Sea, which is south of Bermuda in the northern portion of the Atlantic Ocean. And when they would reach their destination, they would lay their eggs and die there. The migration of eels is one of the most inexplicable and fascinating migrations. Even if eels are born in the Sargasso Sea of the Atlantic Ocean, no adult eel has been caught there, because they quickly abandon their birthplace after they are born and swim toward the rivers of Europe and America, where their parents lived. There is no one to show them the way on their estimated 6,000-kilometer journey, and despite having just been born, they are able to find their way without confusion. They finally reach the rivers where they will spend their lives. They live there, and as if a collective agreement has been made, they all swim at the same time from the rivers directly toward their place of birth, the Sargasso Sea. There they lay their eggs, and the cycle continues in the same way. The interesting part is this: the sea the mother eel came from is the sea that her offspring returns to, and by no means does the offspring go elsewhere. If we do not accept that this journey is realized through God's inspiration, then we must find reasonable answers to the following questions. 1. Why do the mother eels participate in such a long and tiresome migration that will result in their death? 2. Why do they go to their place of birth, the Sargasso Sea, and how do they get there? Or do they have a compass to guide them? 3. How does the young eel know to which sea its mother went and how to get there? 4. Let us say it knows the sea where its mother went and can find its way there. But why does the eel not go to a closer sea and instead chooses to embark on a grueling journey? Why is it so important for the eel to return to the sea where its mothers went? From where did it receive this overwhelming sense of longing to return to its place of birth? We have never heard of a child who was abandoned in the courtyard of a mosque or church, returning to his or her mother's home when they got older. How can a young eel accomplish something that a human, who is the smartest and most intelligent of creatures, cannot do? If you wanted to make a ping pong ball, what would you have to do first? The first thing you would have to do is to set up a mold for the ball, because without a mold, you would not be able to produce the ball. The necessity for a mold applies to every article. For example, let us say you want to make an artificial flower. Once again, the first thing you would have to do is set up a mold, and only in that way could you produce such a flower. Now, let us think of the soil. 500,000 various plants can grow from the same soil. A separate plant or tree will come out of whichever germ or seed you throw into that soil. This situation can have two separate explanations. One, the creator of these plants, trees, and flowers is God Almighty. He has both scientific and spiritual molds for every plant and flower within His wisdom. With His endless wisdom, He has appointed different providential forms for every plant, and with His limitless power, He pushes atoms and elements into spiritual molds and creates beings. All of these instantly occur by His will. 2. If the existence of God is not accepted, God forbid, then one out of these two options must be chosen. A. there must be as many material molds as the plants in the soil. By using these material molds, the soil produces greenery. Nevertheless, there is a work of art present, and a mold must be used for this work of art to come into view. Without a mold, the creation of these orderly plants would not be possible. Since a material mold is necessary even for an artificial flower, it is impossible to create those endless flowers and plants without molds. In that case, there are 500,000 molds for the 500,000 different types of plants in the soil. It is not possible for rational minds to accept that there are 500,000 different molds in the soil, and it does not just end there with 500,000 different molds. Every individual plant amongst the different species has a different form. Its flowers and leaves even vary amongst its own species. In that case, it is not about accepting that there are 500,000 material molds in this soil, but about admitting the presence of material molds when taking the created plants into consideration. No plant looks like another, and every single one requires a specific and unique mold. B. If we are unable to accept that there are unlimited material molds in the soil, which we cannot accept, then we must accept the presence of spiritual and scientific molds, since an orderly work of art cannot be created without a mold. If the mold is not of material, then it must be scientific and spiritual. A handful of soil should know the anatomies of all plants, their shapes, their formulas of creation, the leaves on every plant, their flowers, fruits, etc. And with its power, it should propel atoms to these scientific molds. And this is only possible if the handful of soil has the same amount of knowledge and power as God. If we are to summarize again, the plants, flowers, and trees that come out of the soil have been created so perfectly that it seems as if they have been molded. After seeing the extraordinary creation that is in front of our eyes, we should say, God is the creator of such greenery. Within God's endless wisdom, there is a scientific and spiritual mold for every plant. With the power of incitation, the atoms enter these molds, and plants are created. God forbid, if God's existence were to be denied, then in order to explain the activity that occurs right before our eyes, we would have to accept one of the following two explanations. One, there are material molds for every plant in the soil, and the soil uses those molds to create these plants. In that case, when the plants in the potting soil are taken into account, then the existence of the material molds will be accepted. Two, if the soil does not have material molds, then it must have spiritual and scientific ones. The anatomy of every plant that has been created should be known scientifically, and through the use of power, particles should be propelled into spiritual molds. Do those who do not accept the endless wisdom and power of God, and who deny His existence, not feel ashamed when they accredit a handful of soil with having as much power and knowledge as Him? Or do they actually accept that there is a material mold for every kind of plant that is found in the soil? Is there any other option than the ones we have listed above that allows them to explain the creation of those things? Or do they close their eyes and pass everything off as a coincidence? When we carefully look at this universe, we see beings going to one another for help. Cells depend on atoms. Organs depend on cells. The body relies on its organs. Plants and animals depend on clouds. And people rely on animals. Everything goes to another for help and completes another's task. However, Before one can help another, the one helping must have will and should be able to decide whether or not to help. Alongside will, there has to be power. If one does not have power, then he or she cannot help. In addition, the person helping must have the knowledge to understand the one in need, must be able to hear and see the one in need, have a conscience to feel the other's needs, and dozens of other such qualities. However, creatures that run to help each other do not have qualities like free will, power, and the abilities to see and hear. In fact, a portion of them does not have lives. In that case, these creatures cannot do any helping on their own. It shows that there is, and has to be, an entity behind the curtains who directs the helping. If we were to separate all living beings to one side, then a lifeless, unconscious, willless, and powerless group would remain, like in the example of the powerful helping the weak and the rich aiding the poor. In this instance, it would be necessary for those who are living to help those that are lifeless. However, the reality is just the opposite, because those that are lifeless are helping living beings. Since it is impossible for non-living and willless things to help on their own, it shows that they are all servants and they act upon God's orders. For example, clouds will hurry to help the inhabitants of the earth by watering them. From this situation, we must accept one out of the following three premises. 1. Clouds know humans, animals, and plants, and they pour water out of their compassion for them. And of course, in order to do such a thing, clouds must have qualities like life, free will, power, and knowledge. 2. The human's power compels clouds to rain. The human will command a cloud to rain, and the cloud will rain. These two explanations are not acceptable, and a person who has not lost his mind would not choose either of these options. In that case, the following is the only viable option. 3. Clouds are the servants of God, and with His command, they water the inhabitants of the earth. God is both the creator of the rain and the one who shows compassion to the planet's inhabitants. Just as clouds are in a hurry to help the earth, so too do all commodities rush to help one another. It is not possible for unconscious, lifeless, willless, powerless creatures that have no knowledge to help one another with compassion. Their inability to independently help proves that there is an entity behind the curtain who is directing creatures to help one another. We cannot finish counting examples of the visible cooperation that takes place in our universe. We will only provide an example for the purpose of exemplifying and ask the person who dares to deny God a few questions. A root has two duties. One of them is to hold a tree in place, and the other is to receive elements that the tree needs from the soil. However, the roots of trees with spiky leaves, like juniper and pine, are unable to receive elements from the soil since they grow in acidic areas. As the tree is suffering under this condition, a mushroom grows at its root. The mushroom prepares and presents the elements that are necessary for the tree. To reciprocate the mushroom's kindness, the tree gives a portion of the sugar that it produces to the mushroom. If you still do not accept the reality that God is responsible for this exchange of help, then provide answers to the following questions. 1. How does the mushroom understand this tree's predicament? Of course, it is not possible for the mushroom to know it. However, in order to know, one must have knowledge, whereas a mushroom has none. Do you claim that this mushroom, which has no concept of its own existence, is as knowledgeable as Avicenna? In fact, even Avicenna would not be able to do such a thing. 2. Let us suppose that the mushroom has knowledge and knows about the tree's difficulty. However, helping the tree is a mark of compassion, whereas the mushroom does not have any compassion. Do you think that the mushroom has endless mercy. 3. Now let us suppose that the mushroom has both knowledge and compassion. How is the mushroom able to do the work that the tree roots are unable to accomplish? And how is the mushroom able to produce the elements that the tree needs? Or do you accept that the mushroom has endless potency? 4. Firstly, how does the mushroom know which elements the tree needs? At which school did this mushroom study botany? For example, do you know which elements a tree needs? If you do not know, then is the mushroom smarter than you? 5. Is it an act of gratitude when the tree produces sugar and offers a portion of it to the mushroom? Is the tree so dignified that it just cannot leave an act of kindness unrequited? We can ask dozens of other similar questions. We have probably understood by now that the one who denies God will be obliged to accept many delusions. Every creature in this universe has its own specific goal, purpose, benefit, and result. No sense of aimlessness, purposelessness, futileness, and wastefulness is seen in any being. It is not possible for mindless and unconscious causes to realize these goals and purposes on their own and to create things based on wisdom. In that case, this situation proves that an existent entity is behind the curtain and that it is he who invents things with wisdom. Volumes of books can be written on the proof of wisdom, because every created being's body bears testimony to the existence of this reason and/or purpose. From this station, we will only look at a mosquito. Actually, a special book can be written on the profundity of a mosquito's body. And in fact, it has already been written. Even if it is only one fragment of the proof or reason, we will only mention one or two characteristics of the mosquito for contemplation. The mosquito has been equipped with an exceptionally sensitive sense of temperature. It can even sense a 1/1000th change in degree of temperature. Since its perception is not dependent on light, the mosquito can even find a blood vessel in a dark room. Once it finds a blood vessel, it chooses a point by means of its proboscis. The mosquito does not pierce the skin with pressure, as is often assumed, but with its top and bottom jaw, which hold the teeth. Like a saw, it cuts the skin through moving backward and forward, and inserts its stinger into the blood vessel from the open tear. Its stinger, which resembles an injection syringe, is protected by a casing. During blood absorption, the sheathing is shed from the stinger. A big problem here is the clotting of blood. Nevertheless, by virtue of another reason, the human body has been created with the ability to form blood clots. Thanks to it, a person will not die of blood loss when an area of his or her body bleeds, and the blood will stop leaking by forming a clot at some later point. If the blood was to clot during the mosquito's consumption, then the mosquito would not be nourished. However, the mosquito takes precaution, as it prevents its prey's blood from clotting by infusing a liquid which prevents the blood from clotting into the vessel through the hole that it has pierced. This is the enzyme that causes the itchiness. Now we ask the person who dares to deny God. 1. Even nurses who underwent training for years have not been able to find the blood vessel and have injected a shot into the wrong place many times. Despite this, a mosquito that has never been trained will never lose track of its destined mark. Who has educated the mosquito? 2. If you say that the mosquito is able to do it through its sense of temperature, then we ask, who has equipped it with this highly developed sensor? And beware saying nature, because blind, deaf, lifeless, and unconscious nature cannot be responsible for such a sapient and profound performance. and it cannot possess millions of individuals. 3. As we have said before, this sense of temperature is not connected to light, and the mosquito is able to perceive the change of temperature even at night. If its temperature sensor was dependent on light, then the mosquito would not be able to be nourished at night, and during the day, its prey would notice the mosquito, so it would not be able to be nourished then either. Therefore, it would mean the end for the mosquito. Who could this craftsman be who possesses such wisdom and who designed the mosquito's sense of temperature in a way that is not dependent on light, so that the mosquito can be nourished, and devised it so that it could work at night? 4. There is a covering to protect the mosquito's tiny stinger. Who was this tailor who sewed this casing? 5. To pierce skin, the mosquito uses its jaws and teeth. Who has taught the mosquito to use its jaws and teeth? In fact, even before this, who created its teeth and jaws with such wisdom? 6. Perhaps the most important of all is the injection of the enzyme that prevents clotting into the tear that the mosquito had pierced. First of all, how does the mosquito know about the clotting of blood? Let us suppose that it knows. Then who placed the workbench and the factory that produces this enzyme into their bodies? Only having a workbench is not enough. There must also be a chemist who knows the formula of this enzyme that prevents the clotting. In that case, which school of chemistry did the mosquito complete? Now we have one more proposal for you. Come and accept that the mosquito is a creature of God, and save yourself from the burden of finding answers to these questions.